Alright, so we're going to continue with Chapter 4 of Book 1 of the Yusupov series. As always, please support the author, get your own copy. I do recommend that you're able to read the notes and annotations in there as well and be able to work through it as well. Link is in the description, so please do that. Alright, so exercise number 1. We're continuing simple pawn endings, and it is white to move here, and clearly we're trying to draw because black is, we don't have a way of really protecting this pawn. We could try and do something like this, but they're just gonna kick our king away, so we can't really save this pawn. But all we need to do is push the pawn here. So we make it where the king has to take it here. If he tries to be tricky and move around first, doesn't really matter. We just want access to this square. And the reason is so that once he takes it, or let's say he takes it right away, we're gonna get access to the square, and we move here on our move right after they take it, because then we're gonna have the opposition, and as we saw in the diagram video, that means black's not gonna be able to lead with his king. He's gonna have to lead with the pawn, and we'll be able to get a position like this at the end, and it's a stalemate, and we draw. Alright, so exercise number 2. There's this thing called distant opposition. Distant opposition is just like opposition, except, so normal opposition, like let's say it was like this, and let's say it's white's move here, black would have the opposition, right? Because white has to give way, one way, and the black king can get in the other way. So distant opposition is, instead of 1 square in between, it's 3 or 5 squares in between, for the same reason. So like let's say black went here and white went here. Now black has to give way, right? Because white had the distant opposition. So the distant opposition can become normal opposition. Well, given that, obviously white doesn't want to move away from the pawn, and if white goes forward here, black gets the opposition. If white goes forward here, black gets the opposition, right? So what we really want to do is we want to go here, because if black comes forward, we can then get the opposition, and he can't even maintain distant opposition because his pawn is actually in the way, right? So black can go this way or this way, doesn't matter. He can try coming over here, doesn't matter. Eventually he's going to get tired of just repeating, and he's going to have to lead with his pawn. And as before, always go straight back in a position like this, so when they step forward you can maintain opposition, because you need to be able to move to the square with opposition. And then after they check us, because it's the only way to keep going forward, then we end up with this stalemate again, right? I apologize, I have to use the board editor, so the pieces kind of get deleted, but trying to show moves with both sides doesn't really work with the regular analysis board, so it's kind of pick your poison here when looking at these endings. More reason for you to work with it on your own board, because then you can move the pieces around as you want. All right, so let's look at exercise 3. Okay, so if we recall, we always want to try and lead with our king, and ideally we want to try and get our king to one of these squares in the 6th rank in front of the pawn. And black is going to be able to, he's close enough, he's going to be able to pretty easily race us to one of these squares, but this is the furthest one from him over here. That's the easiest one for us to try and get to. So what we should do is head this way, around the pawn. Just make the fastest beeline for this square possible. And, no matter which way the king goes, this probably makes most sense. The only square he can reach in time to try and prevent us from getting to this square, which is one of the 6 squares, one of the 6th rank squares, is this one. And once he does, then we grab the opposition, and we're going to be able to make forward progress. Here he can try and be tricky a little bit, because we do have a knight pawn. But again, we can just reroute on the 6th rank to get over here. And in fact, we also can hold on to a reserve tempi with our pawn. So he doesn't actually have the opposition here, you'll notice, because we can burn our reserve tempi. And then we continue forward. And I actually just messed that up. Because you're not supposed to do that. Let's move back. Knight pawns can be tricky. Okay, because you can't just go to this square. You can't just go to that square. And we actually mentioned that in the diagrams. Alright, so let's go back to here. So anyway, once we get to here, we take the opposition, we go here, and let's say they continue to try and be tricky. Let's go ahead and move our pawn. Right, and then this is now when we reroute. So we go ahead and get our pawn up closer. Right, so that then we get here. So yeah, you can see even I can kind of mess it up if I just get too cavalier about it and don't calculate. In a game, you need to really calculate, break it down move by move. Knight pawns are a little bit tricky, so if you can spend a moment just making sure you've calculated it out. But you need to be able to reroute your king over to here, because this is the critical square with knight pawns. In fact, I think in the solution, he doesn't even ask for all of that. Yeah, he actually just well, yeah, he just expects you to, for points, he uses points, which I won't get into because it's content, but he just expects you to find getting to the a6 square. Sorry, I'm ranting a little bit, but I do think it's important that we kind of like study these knight pawning games. So do these a few times on the computer. Maybe I even need to brush up on them. They don't happen too often, but you just need to make sure that you're very careful in when you reroute and that your king is able to get to this square. And it all comes down to that tempo of whether or not in this position it's white's move or black's move. Because if it's white's move, this is stalemate. If it's black's move, he has to move away. So that's really what it comes down to. This is the super all-important position, really anywhere, not just knight pawns, right? Whether king's here or here. All-important position, is it white's move or is it black's move? And if black has to move away, white wins. If white has to come here, then it's a draw. Okay, again, I apologize if that's clear as mud, but that's just the way it is. Pawn endings are very critical. One tempo makes all the difference. Alright, but we did solve that one, just kind of stumbled through it a little bit, but we did solve that, so we're good. We're 3 out of 3. King, pawn, pawn. Alright, this is exercise number 4. This is white to move. And the main thing here is that we don't want to allow the black king, the defending king, to get close enough that he's going to be able to entomb our king. So we need to box him out, you know, opposition, right? King's gonna move somewhere, right? Over here. And now he can come forward. But we're gonna be able to get here and promote our pawn, right? So you have to box him out first. Because if we don't box him out first, like let's go back to the original position. And if instead of here we go here, this would be a terrible blunder, because the king can make forward progress. The defending king can make forward progress. And although it doesn't seem like much, he's moving away. Once we go here, he gets to this critical square, which maintains contact with that critical square. And our king gets trapped. And this is a draw, as we saw in the diagram video. So again, in the original position, what we need to do is take the opposition, box out the king so you can't step forward on this move. So it gives us an extra move, in a way. Because now he's just now getting to the 5th rank. And we win. Alright, so that was number 4. Let's move on to number 5. Alright, so this is number 5. This one's kind of funny, but again, we want to lead with our king, and we want to have the opposition. So the answer is actually this. And we just keep taking the opposition until we get over to here. and eventually the king's going to have to make way. What I mean by that is whether he goes here or back to here or steps back, now we're in front of the pawn leading the charge, right? And we're just going to keep forcing him away. And of course, we're going to run the pawn down and promote it. So number 6. Okay, this is white to move. The main thing here is that we cannot allow black to put his pawn here, because he's going to have that defensive idea that we looked at a while ago. So like if black's pawn gets here, he doesn't even have to worry about us taking this pawn, because once our king gets closer, like he could just shuffle forever. Once we take the pawn, he's going to go here and have the opposition, right, and draw. So black actually has an implicit threat here to just put this pawn here and say I draw. Right? We can sit here wasting time if we want, but the game's over. It's a draw. So the only way to stop that is this, right? Because winning the pawn on the 6th rank is a major difference. Because if our king gets to the 6th rank, leading the pawn, then it doesn't matter who has the opposition. We win. So here, the king can go here or here. It doesn't really matter. We're gonna step forward. Doesn't really matter. Eventually we're gonna make progress. I'm just kind of making random moves for the king. I mean, if we go this way, we're gonna go win this pawn, right? So he's probably gonna have to go back this way. Again, if we step back, we're gonna go win that pawn. He could try this. Eventually, one way or the other, we're gonna force the king back. And again, it doesn't matter if he has the opposition. Once we're already on the 6th rank. Because here, okay, sure, it's our move. This is a knight pawn, but in this case it's nice. We don't have to worry about rerouting. We can just go to this square right away. And again, it matters whose move is it in this position. And unfortunately for black, it's black's move. So black has to move his king out of the way, and we promote the pawn. So going all the way back, just to make that clear again, or as clear as I can make it. We want to be able to capture the pawn with the pawn on the 6th rank because we want our king on the 6th rank, because opposition doesn't matter then. And the only way to stop the pawn from pushing to the 5th rank, where opposition does matter, is by pushing our pawn first. So normally, you want to charge in with your king, but in this case, because there's a defensive idea for black, we got to move our pawn first, and then we can charge in with the king. All right, so that was number 6. So let's set up position number 7. Okay, and this is white to move, and white seems to be in a bit of trouble here because black is, much closer to the pawns. Might just be threatening to like move over, gobble these pawns, or something like that. Like, so what do we do here? What do we do here is white. Well. And when I say we're in trouble, I don't mean we're in trouble in the fact that we're losing per se, but I just mean like we'd like to win this game, right? And it looks like black has lots of defensive ideas. However, if you remember the whole rule of the square thing, it's a guideline, but if squares are cut off, whether by the king doesn't have access to them or there's something in the way, then it doesn't really quite work. So what do I mean? If we just push this pawn, it's one square closer to promotion, and the king isn't in the square. Now you might think, big deal, this pawn's in the way. Well, we'll cover that in just a second. But anyway, he can't step into the square, right? This is the square. He can't step into it because of our pawn. If black moves... Sorry, this board editor is kind of annoying. If black moves the pawn to try and come over, or if black moves his king to try and come over, either way, what we're going to do is we're going to sack this pawn to get this one out of the way. Kind of has to take it, but then he can't get into the square, right? The square is now super tiny, he's not going to be able to catch it. And if he doesn't take it, like let's say he just keeps coming over here, well, unfortunately for him, again, he can't he can't stay in the square. This pawn covers it, so we end up promoting. All right, so this is exercise number 8, and here it is white to move. So this one is trickier, but I think the situation is, yeah, so I think the situation is this, that we don't want to allow black to take the opposition, so, you know, we can move forward with the pawn here, and black is going to try and distract us, right? And make us take it. And then he's going to take here with the opposition, and he's going to take here, instead of the opposition, his king's going to lead and win. But the nice thing is, after this move, we can just follow the pawn, right? With the idea that if now black takes the pawn, we take and we have the opposition, right? And it's not, you know, and if he queens, we take and he takes, then we step up and again we have the opposition. Now where it gets really, this is really quite cool. If the king steps up, again trying to kind of provoke us to take the pawn first. It's like a game of chicken. Like who's going to do it first? Who's going to chicken out first? Again, we don't take the pawn because that would allow him to take this with opposition, and then he's going to go in to win. Of course, we have to maintain contact with this pawn, so the only move is here. As crazy as that looks. So again, if the king takes the pawn, we're going to take this one, and we'll have the opposition. If he takes here, then we can take. And of course, he could try running this pawn, but we can run that one as well to distract the king away, and we'll be able to get our king over in front of his pawn, and we'll be able to draw. And of course, if he goes here, we're just going to run our pawn. We're going to queen. We'd actually win. That would be terrible for black. And if he finally chickens out and he takes this pawn, then we're going to take this and have the opposition. And if he goes back, then we'll just repeat. All right. So that was a lot of variations, but essentially what it comes down to is, again, kind of a game of chicken. Like whoever takes this first is going to have the worst results, whether that's losing or drawing when you were trying to win, because the other side's going to get the opposition. So we just have to keep dancing around. And then eventually, if black gets tired of repeating, he's going to take the pawn. And actually, okay, so I think I'm still off a little bit because black had that reserved tempo. Oh, right. I think there was something else I needed to do here. I'm not cheating and looking at the answer, by the way, but what I am doing is I'm just, I forgot I had another thought. So here, I think white might need to lead with this. Pawn takes, and then here. And again, the whole idea is that pawn push, king steps up. Here. If he tries this, we can run. And we queen just in time. Right? So he can't really do that. If he takes it, we're gonna take, and then he won't have the reserved tempo. And going back, let me set the original position up. So again, we sack this pawn. Pawn goes here, here, and again, like if he queens, of course we have to take it, right? Then after he takes, again, we have the opposition. So I think that's what the solution is putting together two things. Realizing that we need to remove the reserve tempo that black's going to have. So sack this first, and then play that game of chicken that I was talking about. Sorry, play that game of chicken that I was talking about, where we just don't take the pawn, and we just kind of wait for them to take the pawn, and we can take and get the opposition. All right, so I'm going to double check the solution just because that was a little confusing. Yeah, so king b3. All right, so c5 first is actually not right. So king b3, what I had first was right. a2, king b2, king b4, king a1. Ah, okay, so this is what it comes down to. So I had the right ideas, but just didn't quite put it all together. Pawn endings can be hard. They can be hard. Okay, so we don't sack the pawn first. We do what I had suggested first. But remember, I ran into that issue where black had a reserve tempo, so then I was kind of in trouble. Okay, so once we get to this position, and black takes this pawn, this is where before we take back, now we throw this in. And black has to take, of course, so that we're not queening. And now we take. And that gets rid of the reserve tempo. So a lot of times, you know, one tempo, and we got to get the exact move order. So I'll go all the way back just because I definitely botched this one a little bit. Again, I had the right ideas, but didn't execute properly. What we need to do is bring our king over. Sorry, this king is here. So let me start back again. We're going to bring our king here. They're going to move their pawn up. We don't take it yet. They're going to bring their king here. We still don't take it. Eventually, they're going to realize they're making no progress, so they're going to take this pawn. Now we sacrifice this pawn. Black has to take. Now we take here. And there we go. Now we hold the draw because we have the opposition and black has to move their king. So that one was definitely complicated. So people always talk about how you don't need to study in-games because they're so simple. That's not true. Even with just a few pieces on the board, they can be quite complicated because it all comes down to like one tempo. Alright, so this is white to move. This one supposedly is as hard as the last, but I actually think it's quite easy because if we notice, we just need to push this pawn here. And the reason is because if black takes it, right, we can go here, distant opposition. If he steps up, we're going to take the opposition. And if he tries to kind of like be cheeky and move over, we're going to continue to have the distant opposition. And, you know, eventually he's going to have to step up, right? Eventually his king is going to have to step up somewhere. And once he does, whenever he steps up, whether it was back here or here or here, we step in front of the king, right? So if he stepped here, we step here. If he had stepped here, we can step here, right? So just kind of going back again, make sure I have the pawn in the right square originally. This is position 9, pawn was here. Yeah. We move the pawn forward. Let me just start that over again. We move the pawn forward, and if he takes, then we go here. So that no matter where he goes, we can take the opposition by going to the corresponding square. So he steps up, we take the opposition, and we draw. Only other thing black could try is like not taking this pawn. But of course he can't let us take that pawn, that would just be a draw, so we'd have to like try pushing it. In which case, yeah, what's he going to do? Because if he steps his king up, he's not going to be able to catch our pawn, and if he tries moving this pawn forward to come over and gobble this, then he's leading with the pawn. So, you know, it doesn't really, like, he's leading with the pawn. This is, as we've looked at many times, this is a draw. So, either way, whether he takes the pawn first or later, we're going to be able to draw this. Okay, so number 10. This is white to move. And here, I believe we can win this, and what we do is we step here first. So notice this kind of forces the king away from the pawn. And there's an important point here. The black king has choice of square, right? We're not so much worried about taking the pawn as we are about taking the opposition. So if the black king goes here, then that's nice and convenient. We can take the pawn and the opposition at the same time. But if the black king goes here, don't do this, because the black king gets the opposition and they hold the draw, as we've seen numerous times. Instead, go here, and one of two things happens. Either they move their king over, and then we take and have the opposition, or they try and run the pawn. Again, don't take, right? Instead, you move your pawn. Ours is a lot faster. They actually can't get over to it now. Both squares are covered. And then, well, that's actually checkmate, right? So going back, king was here, and we go here. We step here. He can't stay on the pawn. He goes here. We take the opposition, not the pawn. The opposition is what matters here. And now if he comes over, we take it, and he has to move away, and we queen the pawn. All right, so number 11. Okay, so number 11, we don't want to just push the pawn right away, because if he takes, then we take, and then he's going to go right there and have the opposition, right? So I believe we need to lead with this move first, because the only move he has is this. You cannot just move the king over. That would be stalemate. But we can move this pawn here. In which case, well, if he moves the king over, we're just going to check here, promote, and queen, right? So he must take it. And then now we move our king over. Either one of these squares. Doesn't really matter, right? And he can't move his king. He has to move the pawn. Check. Queen. And we win the game. Okay, number 12. It's white to move. It looks like we're in trouble here because the black king is like ready to take our pawn and so close to his pawn, and ours is like way far away. But what we can do is we can move our pawn forward too. And what's going to happen is black king has to kind of go back and try and get that pawn and then get his king out of the way. And that's going to take 1, 2, 3 moves to do all that. You know, 1, 2, and 3 moves. What all we need to do, because this is a rook pawn, is we just need to get our king to the corner or entomb his king. So we move forward 2. His king has to backtrack. Now we start moving our king this way. And if he just, you know, moves his king over, then we're just fine to come over here. If he tries to box us out a little bit, we're going to come here. And again, we're threatening to go to the corner. Because this is the critical square, remember? Aggressive side wants to occupy that square. Defensive side wants to attack the square so they can't occupy the square. And of course, yeah, so if they just move a pawn, we're just going to go over here, park in the corner, it's a draw. Only way they can try and stop us from doing that is this, but then now we're boxing the king in, right? Where either one of two things happens. If he steps up this way, well, we just go win the pawn, right? If he steps this way, we get to the corner. And if he tries moving the pawn, again, we just shuffle, right? King moves away, we're gonna run to the corner. If he goes, we just continue to stay here, right? That's not making any progress. If he moves the pawn, then at this point he either has to step out and again let us get to the corner, or he goes the corner himself, and we just keep repeating. And the only way he can continue to make progress is to move his pawn. But at this point, he's entombed, and we actually stalemate him. So remember, rook pawn endings, we just need our king in the corner or their king in the corner, and we're gonna draw. this is the critical square. We can't let them occupy that square with their king, because then they can just shelter the pawn in. Alright, so that was solution to number 12. So that's it for this first book, but of course we have the revision exam bonus 6 exercises. So I'm going to pull those up real quick. Alright, so let me set this one up. Got a white to move problem here. Okay, so this is white to move. Yeah, and I think the solution here is just that we push the pawn, because let's say the king moves away to guard his pawn. Then we can just take, and then we're stepping in front, and he's going to have to leave with his pawn, right? Because our king is now in front of the pawn. And if he takes, then we step in front of the pawn, and although he has 2 pawns, they're double isolated, and in fact he can't even protect this pawn. He's just gonna have to move his king away somewhere. In fact, if he moves away over here, we're actually gonna win both pawns. If he moves back, or like here, like all we need to do is step straight back, and we're gonna have the same kind of 1 pawn situation where it's a draw. Alright, so exercise number 2 of revision exam, number 13 overall. This is black to move. Again, we want to get rid of those reserve tempi, so you remember I kind of messed up a problem a few ago where I didn't get rid of the reserve tempi, so black needs to go here. So then after the white pawn takes, we step over, we take the opposition, and white doesn't have a reserve tempo with his pawn to get the opposition, so white has to move one of the kings over, the king over one way or the other, and then start leading with the pawn, and anytime he leads with the pawn, it's going to be a draw. Alright, so let's do another one with the revision exam. Let's do number 3 here, number 15 overall. Okay, so this is a white to move problem, and this is kind of tricky at first glance, because we don't want to do something like this and let his king over. We don't want to allow... Well, I think this actually might be the answer, because if he steps up, then we take, and when he takes, we take the opposition. But I'm also a little curious about this situation where he has a tempo to burn, or we do, whoever takes advantage of it first. If we try pushing the pawn, then... yeah, so if we push the pawn, they're just gonna run this pawn. So like we push, they run here. And you can take the opposition here. Although that's interesting because we move back. Can we then do this? And then we take, and they take. They follow us. That still seems to be winning for us. So maybe we do push the pawn, simply because it forces them to make pawn moves. So like let's say we go here, and they go here. Seems to be the same thing. Yeah, this one's a little challenging. I think this is the answer. because the king can't move, so we're limiting what black can do. Black would only have this move, or this move. And looking at this one, ooh, okay, so maybe that's the issue, because if we go here and they push here, we can't move our king over to stay on the pawn, and we can't move this pawn anymore. So this doesn't quite work because of that. If we go here, maybe this is the answer. Of course, they don't want to take and let us get the opposition, but they could go here or here. All right, so let's say we do this. Let's say they go here, and we come up. I think we're just winning this pawn, right? And then we can even abandon this one, running at that one. So that doesn't seem to work. Okay, so let's say we go here and they go here. We can't move forward towards the pawn. We'd have to either do something like this or this. I think this is the idea. And then they can't move their king out of the way because we'll come up and promote. So pawn here, pawn here, pawn here. And then they gotta go pawn here. In which case, we can't let them promote their pawn, so we have to go here. Yeah, and I think that's the answer. So then they can take our pawn, and they have the opposition. And we take their pawn, and then they move here, they still have the opposition. Still have the opposition. They still have the opposition. We take their pawn, they still have the opposition. They still have the opposition. But we have a reserve tempo. And then we win the opposition at the end, and then we win the game. All right, so that one was complicated. That one was supposed to be an easier problem, but that was like not at all. I still may have made a mistake, so I'm going to double check the solution. But I think here first, followed by this for black, followed by this for white, followed by this for black, followed by this for white, and then takes here, 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 takes, here, 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 pawn push to win the opposition, and then win the game. All right, so I'm going to double check that. Exercise number 3. Okay, so apparently that wasn't right. Like I said, I'm human too, I make mistakes. These things can be quite complicated. It doesn't even look at this move. So I might have to just turn on the engine. He looks at king b5. Alright, so we'll look at that line. King b5. Alright, I'm just going to use the engine because there's a lot of permutations here. So let's just load this up. King b5 is the only answer, only one that works. Alright, so let's see why this doesn't work. Okay, so you can move the king, but then apparently this move that I looked at also draws. I thought it didn't after b7. c5, king b5, king takes. So this is, I looked at all of this. Oh, right. If you remember our previous problems, black can make us take. So he can even go here first. Once our king gets close enough, then he can't do this anymore because our king will be too close to the pawn. But at some point he can do this, and then we don't have the reserve tempo I was counting on. And then he's going to be able to draw because he has the opposition. So these endgames, they can be really tricky. Okay. So my idea was clever, but not clever enough. So apparently the answer is king b5. And here, like, I was kind of worried about something like this. But of course he gets the opposition. And now we have the reserve tempo. Right. Because even though he goes here, we now have that reserve tempo. Okay, so yeah, king b5. So sometimes it's even easy to identify the theme. Like, I knew it had to do with having a reserve tempo over here, but you gotta get the move order right, and it comes down to just concrete calculation. Honestly, total sidebar, but it's why I hate a lot of chess games, the formats, whether it's online especially, but even over the board where they do like this 5-second delay nonsense or things like that. You get to the end game and there's just no time. There's no time. You don't have time on the move. Even a 30-second increment, you don't have time. That's why I really like when they have multiple time formats. So like you get to move 40, you get to move 60, whatever, you get more time, because these end games can be so critical, and you play a gorgeous game and then you have no time to think in the end game. But anyway, that was a total sidebar. But king b5, only winning move. All right, that was a pretty one and very tough. Okay, so let's move on to exercise number 4. All right, so this one is black to move here. Obviously, he's trying to draw. I think I'm trying to figure out if we can just move our king over. So we move our king, they move towards our pawn. I don't really see how they ever make progress. Oh, okay. I apologize. Did mess this board up just a little bit, so it makes some sense why this is trickier. Okay, so this is black to move here. Black to move and draw. White is threatening to come over and win the pawn, and then, you know, get up here. And of course, even if we somehow got our king over here with, which that would be impossible to do, but even if we can magically get our king here after he took, he'd also have a reserved tempo. So the only thing that makes sense to me is pushing, because if he takes, we can start running this way. And again, we've made contact with this square. If he doesn't take, then we can distract him away. Right? He could try racing us, but I think it's even, we can even just queen, we can both queen, and that's going to be a draw as well. And yeah, I mean, if he tries to go grab our pawn, then we're just going to be able to get in front of his. So I think it's just as simple as pushing our pawn forward so that either he takes it and it's a rook pawn and we're able to get over close enough to a drawing position, or we can, if he tries to make it a race, like it's a draw on all lines. I'll just double check here, but I don't see what would be wrong with that analysis. Yeah, h5, so h5 is the draw. Okay. Alright, so moving on to number 5, number 17 overall. This king here. Alright, and this is white to move. Alright, so this one is fairly tricky, but we don't want to allow any kind of like... Alright, the main thing is, you know, black's king is super far away, so the tricks he's going to have is, like, if we try stepping up, he could do, like, this kind of a thing, where suddenly, if we take it, it's a rook pawn. If we push, he can kind of, like, distract our king back, I think. and then get the opposition and draw, right? So I think what white needs to do is route this way. Because, so if he pushes now, we're just going to push past. And we don't waste time having to double back like we would in the other line. We can just come over here, grab the pawn. So we can look at that, right? So if black sacrifices here, or sorry. Pawn up. And let's say he tries to move his king closer. And then we go here. Right, so we can look at that. So pawn push here. Obviously just pushing again, letting us take doesn't make any sense, so we can start moving his king closer, but I'm gonna take this pawn, he goes here, and then we get here. And if he goes here, we just take the opposition in front of our pawn. If he goes here, we just keep, keep running up, right? Eventually, he's gonna have to stop us, and we're gonna step over and have the opposition sooner or later, right? So I think that's the whole idea, is we have to move our king back and then in front of the pawn. So I'll go ahead and check now, but I'm pretty sure king g1 in the original position is the solution, and king g1, yep, only way to win. All right, cool. So we solved that one as well. And last one. This is white to move. This is definitely a little tricky because, like, let's say we just move our king somewhere, and he moves the pawn. We can't just take that pawn because that would be stalemate. And obviously, if we push, he's going to come over here and gobble this up, right? But I think we still move the king. So, like, let's say here. I think this is what makes the most sense, because we want to get to this square. And after he pushes, he only has two moves, right? We can look at both. If he goes here, then he's not going to be able to catch our pawn, right? He can't catch it. We queen and we win. So he can't step up with the king. And since he can't step up with the king, the only move he has is this. And we, again, don't want to take it because it would be stalemate, but I believe we can go here. And again, the only legal move he has is to push this and promote to something, doesn't matter what. And of course, we do have to take it at that point. But now, unfortunately for the black king, he only has these two moves, and either of which he does, we can push this pawn, and he can't catch it, right? If he tries to promote his own, unfortunately for him, it's a rook pawn. So, like, if he takes a move to move a pawn, we don't have to move ours yet. We can just put our king in the corner so that he's never promoting his. And again, he can never catch ours, so we're going to queen. So I think that's the answer, is that we just play king g1, he plays g2, we play king h2, he plays g1 promotes, we take the promoted piece, and then once his king steps up, then we start running our pawn. So let me check. Yep, king g1, g2, king h2, g1 promotes, say queen, king takes the queen, and then after the king moves up, say g3, we play f5 and we win. So that was correct. Alright, so I did pretty well. Messed up one or two, I can't remember exactly, but pretty well with all the exercises. And that is it for Chapter 4. We'll move on to Chapter 5 in the next video.